This video is going to cover Algebra 2, Section 1.1b. It actually starts on page 6, but I'm going to add a little bit of an introductory page here in your notebook and do just kind of a quick review of the fractions that you would have learned back in, gosh, I don't know, 3rd grade, 4th grade. I'm not sure when you first do fractions. So just real quick, remember, in order to multiply fractions, you do not have to have a common denominator. Basically, when they're being multiplied, you would just think of it like one big giant fraction and you multiply the numerators and then you multiply the denominators. So this one would just turn into 2 over 15. And then, of course, if it can be simplified, you always want to do that. Okay? For division, remember I don't know if your teacher taught you this, but I remember hearing the phrase keep, change, and flip. Teachers used to say, okay, keep, change, flip. And what that means is you keep the first fraction as it is, you change the division into multiplication, and then you flip the second fraction. So instead of 2 over 5, you would have 5 over 2. And now that it's multiplication, you do like we did on number 1. Think of it as just one big giant fraction. Multiply the numerators, multiply the denominator, and you're going to end up with 5 over 6. And again, you know, if you could simplify, then you would do that. Okay, so number 3, this is the one I want to kind of camp on, and this is the one that's going to really lead us into section 1.1b. So remember, when you're adding or subtracting, this is the one time when you definitely need a common denominator. Common denominator. And remember, common denominator is used whenever you are adding or subtracting. So it's for adding or subtracting. Okay, so we're adding or subtracting. So in this case, the first denominator you can see is 3, the second denominator is 5. And so you would just think of a number that both 3 and 5 go into. And a lot of times teachers say, oh, you have to have the least common denominator. Well, the smallest number is going to make your life a little easier, but it doesn't really matter. You can still add as long as they are the same number. So whenever you're not sure, in order to find the common denominator, just multiply the two denominators. So in this case, the common denominator is 15. So we're going to rewrite both fractions so that there's a denominator of 15. And so the idea is, for the first fraction, well, what did you multiply to change the 3 into 15? Well, you multiplied by 5. Okay, that means you have to multiply the numerator by 5. So your new numerator is not 1, but it is 1 times 5. And then on the second one, what did you multiply this 5 by to get 15? Well, you multiplied it by 3. Since you multiplied the denominator by 3, you have to multiply the numerator by 3. So now my new numerator is 2 times 3, or 6. And now that I have the same denominator, I can add the numerators. 5 plus 6 would be 11, and you would keep the denominator of 15. So this was just kind of a reminder of how to handle common denominator. Okay, so that brings us to 1.1b. If you look at number 1, it's addition. You got to have a common denominator. Like we said, the easiest way to do that is to make a common denominator of the product. So 35, rewrite both fractions. What did you multiply the 7 by? Well, you multiplied by 5. So the numerator is going to be 15. What did you multiply this 5 by? Well, we multiplied by 7. So the numerator is going to be 14. And so now when I add 15 and 14, I get 29 over 35. Okay? So how do I handle it when I have a whole bunch of fractions? This looks terrible. But let's do this. First, let's just get rid of all the parentheses and all of the weird signs. Okay? So on the first set of parentheses, do I really need those parentheses? Well, if there's nothing out in front, you don't need those parentheses. So I have negative 2/9 and minus 1/2. Now over on this one, notice how you have minus a negative right here on the inside. That becomes a big giant plus. And so now on the outside, this negative is going to distribute to both. So I'm going to have negative 5 over 18 and negative 1/9. Okay, so now I don't have to worry about any of those parentheses. Now it's all about common denominator. Well, I don't want to multiply all of these. I don't want to do 9 times 2 times 18 times 9. So look at the highest number, the 18, start there. Do all of them go into 18? And as a matter of fact, they do. So what I could do is I could just go ahead and make a common denominator of 18, rewrite every single fraction with a denominator of 18. Notice all of them are negative, so I'll put a negative on all of them. So on the first one, let's see, I multiplied this one by 2. I multiplied this one by 9. This one I didn't multiply at all, so don't worry about that. And this one I multiplied by 2. So what are my numerators? Well, 2 times 2 is 4. Yeah, that's a negative. 1 times 9 is 9. This one stays a 5. And right here we're going to have 1 times 2 is 2. And now that they all have the same denominator, we just add the numerators. So negative 4 and negative 9 is negative 13. And negative 5 is negative 18. And negative 2 is negative 20 over 18. So here's a situation where, yeah, we've added them, but I can simplify, right? Won't 2 go into both of those? So this is going to turn out to be negative 10 ninths. Okay? All right, what's going on here on number 3? Well, it's like a fraction over a fraction, and we're actually going to deal a lot with this kind of stuff throughout the year. When I have a fraction over a fraction, what that means is this fraction is being divided by this fraction. So if you want, you could write it that way. You could say 1/2 divided by 2/5. And how did we talk about doing division? Well, you keep the first fraction, change to multiplication, and you flip the second fraction. And so now if I go straight across, I'm going to end up with 5/4. Okay. Again, the things we're doing right now, none of this is new. I shouldn't be teaching you anything new. It just may be refreshing your memory because it's been a while. Okay. So look at number 4. Sometimes people get hung up on these when you have one fraction and one that's not a fraction. Well, my suggestion is think of all of them as fractions. Okay. So now I would say, oh, got to have a common denominator. So the product would be 7. What did I multiply the first one by? Well, I multiplied by 7. So the first one is 14. Don't have to change the second one. Stays a 5. Do your subtraction. And we're going to get, what is that, 9? 14 minus 5. So 9/7. And by the way, we never, when you have an improper fraction, right, when you have a higher number on top than the bottom, you never need to change it to a mixed number. I mean, yeah, I know that is equivalent to 1 2/7. And it's good that you know that, but there's no need to change it. Okay? Now, here comes something that looks awful. Okay, I have fractions being added on top, fractions being added on bottom. And if you think about order of operations, there's kind of this implied parentheses up here and this implied parentheses down here. And what that means is first you're supposed to add these together, and then you add these together, then you can do the division part. Okay, well, I have kind of a handy dandy little trick that I think is extremely helpful on these. Okay, look at all of your denominators. So I have a 3, a 2, a 6, and a 3. And that's what I mean when I say look at all of the denominators. Okay, of those, what would be the common denominator? And hopefully you can tell the common denominator would be a 6. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the entire numerator by 6 and the entire denominator by 6. And what should happen is in one step, I should get rid of all fractions. Okay, so here's how it works. On the top, when I multiply the whole thing by 6, I would have to distribute that to both of these, right? Okay, so really, now I'm going to take you off to the side and show you this, but we're not going to do this work every time. Okay, so when I take my 6 and I multiply it by 2/3, okay, think about it. You would think of the 6 as being over 1. And yes, you could do, straight across, but didn't you learn to simplify when you're multiplying fractions? Like in this case, you could say, oh, look, 3 goes into 6 2 times. And so now all you have left on top is the 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, so we're going to kind of do that in our head. Sometimes I think less is more. So here's the way I'm going to look at it. When I multiply 2/3 times the 6 over 1, do you see that the 3 goes into 6 2 times? And so now all I have is that 2 times the 2 that was on top. I have a 4. Okay, but now remember I have to multiply that 6 times the 1/2. Well, this time the 2 cancels the 6 and leaves a 3. And so what I have left there is just the top. 1 times 3 is 3. So the entire numerator is just 4 plus 3. Okay, so let's go to the denominator. When I distribute this 6 to the 1/6, right, think about this as being over 1. Won't those 6's cancel? So all I have on top there is that 1. Bring down the plus sign. Okay, over here, when I multiply the 6 times 1/3, doesn't the 3 go into 6 2 times? And so all I have left there is that 1 times 2. Well, look, I mean, I don't have to do any common denominators, right? This is going to be an easy simplify. It's just going to come out to be 7 over 3. We are going to use that concept quite a bit this year, off and on, and then you use it a lot again the next couple years. Okay, so I look at this one, look at all of your denominators. You have a 5, a 2, a 2, and a 10. So I think the common denominator is going to be 10. So I'm going to multiply all of this by 10 and all of this by 10. Okay, so on top, 5 goes into 10 2 times, so it's just the 2 times 2 plus, okay, on the next one, when I multiply by 1/2, well, the 2 goes into the 10 5 times, so it's just 5 times 1. Okay, in the denominator, when I multiply the 1/2 times 10, 2 goes into 10 5, so that's going to be 1 times 5 plus, and then for the last part, remember this is still a 10 now, times 3/10. The 10's cancel and all you have is 3. So this is going to come out to be what, 9 over 8. Okay, hopefully you found that much easier than it originally looked like it was going to be. Okay, now something important. We're going to gradually throughout this year learn some different skills on the calculator. Okay, make your life easier. So you need to know how to do both, right? Sometimes it's no calculator, but it's also going to be important to use the stuff on the calculator. So how do we add fractions on the calculator? Well, in general, how do we even use fractions on the calculator? So you'll notice the directions up here. By the way, we are using only TI-84s this year. I'm not even teaching you how to do this on Inspires. Those should be gone. So to enter a fraction, you would press alpha y equals. Okay, so let me show you on my calculator here. So I'm going to press the alpha key. On mine, it's the green one right here. So alpha, then you press y equals, and it comes up with a menu. Well, notice the top one says n over d. That means numerator over denominator. Okay, so that's the one we would use for a fraction. So you can either press enter or you can press number 1. So choose number 1, and then it pops up. And so now, excuse me. Now it's easy to know, how to fill this in, and you don't need to worry about parentheses. So I'm going to put the first one here, 9 over 22. So 9. Use the arrows to move the cursor. So I'm going to press the down arrow, and then I'm going to put 22. Okay, so now I need to move the cursor out of the fraction. I want a plus sign. And now I want another fraction. How do we say to do it? Alpha y equals, choose number 1, and then I want 15, press your down arrow, and 7. Now, if you want, you can move your cursor out there to the end, or it doesn't matter. If you're ready to let it do the math, then just press enter, and it'll give you the answer as a fraction. So here's the thing. When we put in fractions in the calculator, we're hoping for a fraction answer. I don't want a decimal answer. Okay, so if you can put a fraction, put a fraction. So for my answer, I'm going to put, what is that? 393 over 154. 393 over 154. And I've got just a snip there of what it should look like. You guys are being introduced to my dogs. They're very loud. I'm sure if you watch any amount of videos, you'll see plenty of videos where you can hear my dogs. All right, let's go again. So look down here at number 2. Well, this is one big giant fraction. So on my calculator, I'm just going to set up a fraction. So alpha y equals, right, choose number 1. So in the numerator, I want a subtraction problem. So I'm going to put 13 minus 22. Notice I'm making it look just like I see on the paper. And the denominator, I'm going to put 53 minus 26, just like it looks on the paper. Again, since I don't need to put anything else in, I don't have to move my cursor out. I could just press enter, and I'm going to get negative 1/3. So negative 1/3. Okay. Now something else I want you to learn to do on the calculator, whenever you have a lot to put in, there's no reason to do a little bit at a time. You can put that whole thing in as one line and then just hit enter and you're done. In fact, you're going to make fewer mistakes if you do it that way. So let's type in exactly what we see. So 21, hopefully you're already used to the square key. See the x squared kind of right here on the left side, kind of in the middle. So then I would press x squared. I'm going to put minus, and then there's a 5. Again, I'm going to make it look exactly like I see. So I'm going to do a parentheses. And now I want a fraction, so alpha y equals, oh my, I'm sure something very important is happening outside. The dogs are going crazy. And so in that fraction, I want 31 over 2. So 31, don't forget to press the down arrow to go to the denominator. Now, since I want to close the parenthesis on the entire fraction, notice if I do the close parenthesis now, it's just going to be in the denominator. So I'm going to go back and delete that. Since I want it to be on the entire fraction, I have to move my cursor out. So there's my parenthesis. Plus, so now I want a parenthesis and I want a fraction. So alpha y equals, all right, we're just going to pause for a minute here. Okay, so now we're going to put in the next fraction. Let's see, what is that next fraction? It is 14 over 3, so 14, down arrow, put in your 3. Now remember, you got to move the cursor out to the end, close your parenthesis, and now if I want it to the 4th, remember to do exponents on your calculator other than just a square. You can use this little caret key that's right above the division symbol. So if you just press that little caret, it takes you up to the exponent. Notice up here on the screen, we're going to type in an exponent of 4. And again, since I'm at the end, I'm ready to do enter, right? Equals is enter. You don't have to move your cursor. You can just leave it, press enter. It gives me this horrible, ugly looking fraction, but you know what? I don't care. Calculator did all the work. That's going to be simplified. So 135,719 over 162. 135,719 over 162. And just leave it. I think that's what it was. Did I remember that correctly? Yep, there we go. All right, so again, on number 4, now that you know where that fraction key is, you can do anything ugly like this. Just type it in exactly the way you see it. So how about I won't talk. I'll be doing the keystrokes. Why don't you try it by yourself? See if we get the same answer, okay? One thing I will mention, and that is when you're putting in subtraction, make sure that you use the subtraction key and not the negative key. Notice the negative is down there to the left of enter, but the subtraction key is the one right over here above the addition, and it matters. It'll give you a different answer. All right, spoiler alert, about to tell the answer. So if you're not done, you might want to pause, but I get negative 23 over 693. Negative 23 over 693. Okay? And perhaps one of the best places that it's helpful to use the fraction key is when you're graphing. Okay, so I don't know how much graphing you would have done in Algebra 1, hopefully a little bit, but, and we'll do a lot more of it later, but in order to start to graph, so on your calculator, in order to put in an equation, you go up here to the far left at the very top where it says y equals. Okay, so just press y equals. Now, depending on if somebody's used your calculator, you know, there might be stuff in there, there might not, no big deal, just clear. So I'm going to move my cursor down and clear everything that's there. Okay, so I'm just going to start up there at y1. And I want to put in, notice right here it says graph the equation y equals this. Don't worry about that 1. That's just because I have a choice of putting in lots of fractions. So y equals, I want to put in a fraction, and on top I want an x plus 2. Well, fraction alpha y equals, choose number 1. And now on top I want x plus 2. On your TI-84, anytime you want to type in an x, you want to use this key right up here to the right of the alpha key. It says x comma t comma, and then that's called the theta. So you just press, anytime you want an x variable, you just press this key. Okay, so I'm going to put x, and then I want plus 2, and then in the denominator I want x, so I'm going to use that same key, x, and then minus 1. Okay, so I've got this fraction in, and if I want to graph, now again, depending on who's used your calculator in the past, a lot of times you can just press graph and you have a decent, but our windows may look different because it just may be on a different setting. So just so that we're all using the same setting, so we're all looking at the same thing, let's press zoom 4. And that way we're all looking at the same graph. So the zooms just give you different windows. If I want to stretch it out, like if I don't feel like I'm seeing enough, I could have tried zoom, 6 will kind of stretch it out if I want to do that one. But just that way we are using, looking at similar windows. Okay, so that's a basic introduction to using your calculator. All right, so the homework that you're going to do has some that you're going to do on your own with no calculator. Notice they're separated, right? At the top, it's no calculator. You know what? You may get the answer to those, and I'll know if you did them or not because I'll be able to see the work. But thing is, if you do them on the calculator, it's not going to help you. You're not going to get them right on test or quiz, right? You need to know how to do these both ways. I promise you, I'm not going to create busy work for you this year. I know what you need later on, and you need both calculator and no calculator. All right, so good luck with that.